watching another episode of Toastmasters. My name is Theresa Griffin Kennedy, and I'm here with two guests, two writer friends of mine. J.D. Chandler is a Portland writer and historian, and I'm also here with my husband, Don DuPay, who is also a writer and an author. We've brought books with us, and Don will be reading a short excerpt from his new book, which is called Frank's Revenge, Albina After Dark. And we'll be discussing other aspects of writing, including J.D. Chandler's new project, which is a book called The Rogues Gallery that will be published through Font Hill Publishing. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here too.
It's always glad to be here, especially with you two. Talk about books.
Yes. So, what's your new book, Don?
Well, hoping you'd ask. This is a fiction novel of my second attempt at writing and my first attempt at fiction. This is a story about Portland taking place exclusively in 1975 when there was a lot of crime and corruption here in the city. And I've created this private detective character. So his name is Frank McAllister. Let me read to you about it. Don DuPay, former Portland police homicide detective, is a crime fighter turned crime writer. Read along as he brings Private Eye Frank McAllister to life as he scours the dark alleys and dead-end streets of Portland's dangerous Albina ghetto in search of a killer. Be his backup as he works to solve the murders the police don't care about. But why? And what about the council of old gangsters who lured him into the case, using a pretty woman as bait? What do they really want? Things get messy, too, when Black Bart returns from 8 years in prison, vowing to once again be the kingpin of the St. John's drug business and take his old girlfriend back, too. But now, the ghetto dealers wear badges. And, oh, yeah, he wants his old girlfriend back, too. Then there's Indian Charlie, tenderloin denizen with his secrets of death and destruction. And just where is the blind pig, anyway? This is written in the style of Boston Blackie and Mike Hammer, sorta. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. However, the Portland landmarks in this mystery are real. Hella real.
Very nice.
I have a question.
I have a question.
You do a great job of evoking 1975 Portland, I have to say. That's one of the things that I really like best about this book. But you say there was a lot of vice and corruption in Portland in 1975. My question is, when wasn't there?
Well, you probably got that right, because this book is about the corruption of that time. It's a fiction story, of course, but it talks about the smile money that they had to pay, you know, to keep going these underground places. It's really a remembrance of the Tenderloin District, which I worked when I was a street cop and a vice cop. It's a loss, this old dead Tenderloin District where Portland wasn't never safe day or night. 3rd Avenue, 4th Avenue, where the Lotus was, the Old Glory Tavern. Those are all places in the history of Portland that are now lost because it's been so gentrified and torn down and building new buildings. It's a loss that I lament in this book.
And
I was just walking down by City Hall, and I walked past the site where the Old Glory used to be.
Yeah.
And every time I go by there, I think about it. I think of Smokey Joe, who got killed in there,
right.
And the Hamilton Hotel that was just down the block. Mm-hmm. That neighborhood is nothing like it used to be.
The Hamilton Hotel is mentioned in here, and was quite a really dangerous place. A lot of dope dealers.
Murder Hotel and
Murder Hotel.
Blog piece.
Yeah, yeah. So, although it's fiction, there's some pretty true stuff in here. 1975 was a long time ago. The American Legion Convention came to town that year. Spent a lot of money. Helped out all of the illegal businesses, the illegal liquor people, the girls, the hotels. It was wonderful.
They came here fairly frequently. They were here in '70. That's what caused the Vortex.
Yeah, that was
festival.
That's what I'm talking about. It's a '75. It's '75, and the Vortex
So they came in 70.
Yeah,
they came in 70.
Yeah.
And in the book, the characters are
several years.
So in the book, several of the characters are lamenting or remembering when they came, and I think it was 1970, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they're talking about the 1970 visit. Just recently, the lotus was destroyed, so this is kind of a way to give new life to the lotus. We had the opportunity to go to the lotus together in 2014 on 2 visits and walk through all the rooms, and we were able to I was able to help include some data about that, some details about the carpeting and the flooring and that kind of thing, and the way the building was structured.
Well, I did spend a lot of time in the lotus,
Yes.
off and on as a vice cop.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
room number 10 was pretty famous for nefarious activity, and that is where I put Frank McAllister's office. Room number 10 at the
Yes.
Lotus.
And you've also got a copy of your first book, which was
Yeah.
published in 2015.
This is a true story. This is a Behind the Badge in River City, which is Portland Police Memoir. It's about my time in the Portland Police Department from 1961 to 1978, and all of the crime and corruption. It's a true story. There's a lot of interesting stuff still in here. JD and I were talking, some things change, some things never change. And this book was, I joined the police department in 1961, not realizing how corrupt Portland was at that time, with the police chief being a crook and the vice squad all being involved in the gambling. So it's a good story, it's a true story, but Frank's Revenge is kind of based on that because of my history in Albina, so much time in Albina. I spent all 6 years of my street duty either in Albina or St. John's, working that part of town.
So we also wanted to talk about the project you're working on. It's called the
Yes.
Rogues Gallery.
It's going to be called J.D. Chandler's Portland Rogues Gallery.
Awesome.
And the subtitle that I'm kind of working subtitle I'm using for it is A Baker's Dozen Arresting Criminals from Portland's Past.
Cool.
So in some ways I'll be repeating the trick that I did with Murder and Mayhem in Portland, hopefully more accurately. But telling the story of the city from a criminal point of view. So I like C.E.S. Wood's comment, the riches of a city are its people. And I think that needs to include all of the people, including the people who committed crimes and the people who couldn't afford a place to live and who weren't counted anywhere else. So that's the story I want to tell.
And this is going to be published by Font Hill?
By Font Hill Media.
Font Hill Media, yeah.
It'll be coming out, I'm going to finish it by the end of the year, so it'll be coming out sometime in 2020.
Cool. What other projects are you working on?
Well, there's The Werewolf of Portland, of course. I've finished most of the writing on that, doing some rewriting now, and the artwork is almost done. Almost have it completely illustrated, and another friend, Shirley Obitz, is actually writing some music, so there's a bit of a soundtrack for the novel.
I've seen some of the artwork, and it's really, really good.
Caitlin McMorris is very talented. I love the
Yes.
work that she's doing.
Yes. She's created images that incorporate sketching with photos.
In some cases, yes. There are each episode, each chapter has, most chapters have 3 episodes, and she's doing a drawing for each episode, and they're original charcoal drawings. The cover image is partly a modified photograph, so it's an actual street of Portland that she's turned into a drawing, and then her original drawing of the man with the wolf shadow behind him is right in the center of it, and it's beautiful.
Cool.
That's the cover.
So I should talk a little bit about my book that just came out, last year, October of last year. And it won an award, didn't win an award, I was a finalist, which I didn't expect. Anyway, it's called Burnside Field Lizard and Selected Stories. And I was selected as a finalist for the Next Generation Indie Book Award, which was really a surprise, but I'm proud of that. And Oregon Greystone Press has several new projects that we're going to be doing, including Don's next book. Did you want to talk about your next book, Don?
I've actually written 5 books. So far, 2 of them have been published. Frank's Revenge is the second one. The one I'm working on now is basically a memoir. It's called The 4 Stories, and it's from the Hollywood Theater to the Benson Hotel. And the stories follow my time as growing up as a young adolescent in the Hollywood district, going to the Hollywood Theater a lot, spend my time down there on weekends, Saturday matinees, smoking cigarettes, chasing girls, that sort of thing, losing my virginity. The second story is about my time in the Navy when I was sent overseas doing some pretty secret work and how that affected my life and how it affected my life after I got out of the Navy. The third story is a story about one of my ex-girlfriends who was murdered in Seattle. It was kind of a love triangle situation. If he couldn't have her, nobody would, so he killed her and left her, dumped her body in Seward Park in Seattle. It's kind of a sad story, a fun story about an interesting young woman. Her name was Moore. So she was part of my life and part of my history. Sad story, but still had to be told. The third story is a fun one. It's about the Benson Hotel. My time as the director of security there at the Benson. I was there for 6 years from the early 80s on. I was there when President Reagan came to town and took over the hotel, and the Benson became the Western White House. So there's a lot of funny stories in the Benson about over-serving people and how dangerous it was when I first came there, for sure. After about 2 weeks on duty in the hotel, I realized the place wasn't safe to stay in, so I had a lot of work to do. There was no smoke detectors in the entire building anywhere, so it was fun. I upgraded a lot of things. I saved them from losing a major lawsuit. It was a fun time in my life, and I got to see a whole lot of celebrities. We talk about celebrities in this book, so what they really looked like, what they were like when they were sitting in the bar drinking and that kind of stuff. It's a fun story. I hope people enjoy the story. From the Hollywood Theater to the Benson Hotel, coming out sometime in, tell me, editor.
Probably 2020.
2020, yeah.
We have a lot of projects going on right now. But what are some of the aspects of writing that you enjoy? What are some of the aspects of writing that you find difficult?
Well, I used to find it difficult being honest. But once you get over that, and you can't be a writer, you can't be a writer.
Get over being honest or feeling bad about it?
When you get over being
the fear
of being honest. So, God, like I think it was Hemingway said, you open a vein and you bleed, and that's just about the truth. But I've always been almost plagued by writing, because when I try not to write and something comes up I want to write about or have to write about, I get a little ping up here in the back of my head, and it pings away until I try and ignore it. And when I can't ignore it anymore, then I gotta start writing. So when I couldn't ignore it anymore, it became Frank's Revenge this time. So.
And you've got some great blurbs. Do you want to read? You want to read a couple?
You know,
of
I've got a
blurbs?
really great blurb here. I'd like to read. Have my friend J.D. Chandler read it. It says right there.
These are my words. So.
Oh, yes, okay.
Frank's Revenge, Albina After Dark is a great read. Don DuPay brings 1970s Portland to life and populates it with characters as unique and idiosyncratic as the city itself. A natural storyteller, DuPay not only makes the long-gone decades of Portland live again, he weaves a gripping detective story that will have you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end.
That's a great blurb.
I enjoyed that book.
That's a great book. Well, thank you.
And then J.B. Fisher's blurb was a little shorter, but also just wonderful. DuPay's bare-knuckle prose sends readers reeling into gritty 1970s Portland, and the payback is solid. I love that.
One of the things that I can talk about on this story is that for a long time, I had this image in the back of my head of this young woman walking down 4th Street or 3rd Street, and she's in a hurry, and she's looking at her watch, and I always thought maybe she was on her way to the pawn shop to retrieve her wedding ring before it was lost. But I knew someday she'd wind up in a story. She was a white blonde girl in my head, but here she becomes Theta.
Who is a young black woman.
Theta, the young black woman, and she's hurrying down 4th Avenue to see if she can get hold of a detective that's going to help her out because her brother's been murdered.
Right.
Yep.
What are some of the aspects of writing that you enjoy and some of the aspects of writing that you find really difficult?
Well, that's interesting because I've been really dealing with that stuff today. Personally, my theory is that if you're not dealing with self-doubt and fear as a writer, you're not really writing something worth reading.
You mentioned that earlier when we were talking. Yeah.
So I try to deal with self-doubt and fear constantly, which I have plenty of, so it's perfect. But I'm writing nonfiction again, and I'm reading Charles Tracy's work on the early policing in Portland. He was a great writer and a wonderful academic from PSU, and it's really making me feel like I was in college again. I'm really enjoying it. And someone please start buying my fiction so I can stop writing nonfiction. Every sentence has to be fact-checked, and I have to go back and make sure I'm not dramatizing. I have to make sure that I'm telling what really happened and not what I wish happened. And it's
Sure.
a very hard process. With fiction, I can just relax and go.
We talked about that once. Fiction is so freeing and fun, and it's a breeze if you have a good vocabulary, if you have a good imagination, if you can, if you can craft well. It's fun, but gosh, nonfiction writing is a completely different discipline. And what was that expression you said? A famous writer was talking about how you get very little from...
Oh, Gustave Flaubert.
Yeah.
He said that writing history is like drinking an ocean and pissing a cupful.
That's so true. And I remember I read that and I thought, that is so accurate.
It is absolutely what writing history is like.
Because I'm working on this other book. I'm working on 2 books right now. My first novel, which is called Talionic Night in Portland, which is a fictional story about a TV assignment editor and a custodian, and it deals with class consciousness in Portland, which is very, very much a reality here in Portland. But I'm also writing a book called The Lost Restaurants of Portland, and that is so true because the amount of time you have to dedicate to research and fact checking and making sure everything is accurate it's really extensive. So I feel like there's a lot more at stake when you're writing nonfiction.
Well, there is, and it's really easy to get into the drama of the situation and dramatize or romanticize people from the past or romanticize the times or think of the mythology, but you have to be very disciplined about that and make sure every word. I'm writing about Jim LePayas right now, who was the founding police chief of Portland. He's the first of my rogues. He's the first of my bad guys that I'll be actually getting to like the guy, which is a little weird for me. But every single word, there's been so much mythology and so many lies about him and his career and who he was and what he did and what he stands for and what he means to the city. And I just really want to get to what really happened. He was charged with taking bribes. So who was he charged with taking bribes from? What was the story? What was his defense? He had a lot of political enemies, so a lot of the charges against him were political, but a lot of them were true. He was a violent man, and I've uncovered a murder that I think he committed that I'll be talking about, which you guys know about because we did it on the podcast.
Right.
It's making me want to do my podcast and my blogs again, so if you're fans of those, there may be some more coming here very soon.
And your website is called Slabtown Chronicles?
Slabtown Chronicle and Weird Portland are my blogs, and my podcast is Murder by Experts, which you can find on Podomatic.com.
So with your book, J.D. Chandler's Rogues Gallery, who are some of the rogues that you're going to be profiling?
Well, I'm looking at some very specific people from Portland's history. Jim LePayas, the first police chief. Carrie Bradley, the notorious Madam of the Tenderloin in the 1880s, who it was her murder trial that really brought the chief down and ended his career after almost 20 years as a Portland police officer. John H. Mitchell, who was the senator from Oregon for a long time and who will probably go down in history as the most corrupt senator up until the 21st century, where we're breaking all records. But he was the most corrupt senator of the 20th century, lived right here in Portland. I'm going to talk about Jack Laird, the armed robber who became a famous Western story writer while he was in the Oregon State Prison, and who really wanted to be a criminal and was he committed several wild jailbreaks. It's a wild story that's been on my blog for a while. It's what kind of inspired this book. And I want to get into some of the more modern people like William Douglas Wright, who was a hitman and a serial killer. Kind of an interesting character who people know different pieces of his story, but I don't think anyone has ever put everything together to tell the story on him. People like Gary Gilmore, who grew up on the streets of Southeast Portland and hung with a gang at Amato's pool room that I'm very interested in. So these are some of the rogues. Right now I'm really looking at the early part of the city and the founding of Portland and early police presence, and finding some very interesting parallels with what's going on today.
Interesting.
What are those parallels?
Well, I think one of the most important is 1852. This is the year that Jim LePayas arrived in Portland from Sacramento. And the official population of the city was 227. Wow. There were 227 registered voters. This means white men. So they don't count women, they don't count Indians, they don't count Chinese, and they don't count transient workers. So in a city whose official population is about 200, there are probably about 1,000 people or more living here. Yeah. And the majority of them live in tents and traditional homes and temporary structures that are just outside the 2 square mile city limit. So I find that very interesting. The only real difference today is they're inside the city limits. But
so basically Portland hasn't changed much from 1852.
I don't think Portland really has changed. It's just gotten bigger, and it just keeps getting bigger, and we deal with the same problems. And the problems that I think we need to deal with in terms of self-government, if we don't, our grandchildren will, are affordable housing, just law enforcement, and economic opportunity. If we don't decide those things and how we're going to deal with those things here in Portland, somebody will have to, and it'll be our grandchildren or their children or somebody like that, because it's going to keep coming up, because it has kept coming up always.
Do you want to say anything else about your book or writing or anything before we sign off?
As I said, writing this book has been a joy to me, because I was able to get out my frustrations at the loss of the Tenderloin District. I have a particular story which is in this book about the Hamilton Hotel, which is no longer there. I was working traffic. I got a call from a meter maid who was trying to tow a car a couple of blocks away from the Hamilton Hotel. And she called me. The guy didn't want the car towed, and so they got into an argument with the meter maid, and he was opening the trunk, trying to get something out of the trunk and run away. Turned out to be a big bag full of eighths weed, just stacked in there like a whole week's supply. And he ran off with that bag and ran into the Hamilton Hotel. I chased him into the Hamilton Hotel, clear in the back in the kitchen, and grabbed him and tackled him. So the Hamilton Hotel in this fiction story is the same Hamilton Hotel in the real story, so it was quite a place.
And all the details in Frank's Revenge, all the geographical landmarks are all legitimate and all historically accurate.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Don, and thank you, JD, for joining me here today. You've watched another episode of TV Toastmasters, and it's been a great joy to host this show, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
I joined Toastmasters to improve my speaking, listening, communication, and leadership skills.
Toastmasters gave me incredible confidence.
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 Great listening skills.
Poise.
Great leadership skills.
Leadership skills.
The ability to speak in public.
Strength. A captive audience.
Quality feedback from the more experienced Toastmasters.
Toastmasters really helped me improve my listening skills.
Sales skills.
Opportunities to go to different groups and widen my whole horizon.
Toastmasters has given me a more focused me, and I'm a much better listener. Toastmasters is fulfilling.
It's a great place to fail your way to success.
Wonderful way to meet people.
Networking. Strength. It's addictive.
It's a club of self-improvement.
It's an experience, it's a ride that you won't forget, and you'll enjoy it every step of the way.
Toastmasters helped me land a kick-butt job. I sang at one of my table topic speeches, and people liked it and applauded.
My business is doing great, and I'm very, very grateful to Toastmasters.
It's been a great experience for me.
Thank you, Toastmasters.
Thank you, Toastmasters.
Thank you, Toastmasters, for giving me so much confidence.
Thank you, Toastmasters, for everything.